Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we're taking a look at another one of AMD's latest Ryzen Mobile 4000 APUs. You guys have been requesting that we cover more of these latest laptop processors, so I've been on the hunt in the last few weeks and managed to find something for today's review. What we'll be looking at is the Ryzen 5 4600H, which is AMD's new mainstream processor in their H series. The H series is designed for high performance productivity and gaming notebooks, and the Ryzen 5 4600H is actually the lowest tier APU that AMD offers in that series. There's no Ryzen 3 option here. This is the chip AMD is selling for entry-level systems. And on paper, it's quite a compelling piece of silicon to be putting in budget devices. AMD is delivering 6 Zen 2 CPU cores and 12 threads, along with a base frequency of 3.0 GHz and a boost up to 4.0 GHz, along with 8 MB of level 3 cache and a standard 45W TDP. With AMD offering 8 cores in their higher tier parts, like the Ryzen 7 4800H, which we reviewed recently, AMD is able to comfortably include 6 cores in the mainstream while maintaining nice product segmentation. AMD is also providing all the benefits of their Zen 2 7nm architecture here, so that means a significant boost to efficiency over previous generation parts, improved IPC, and a refreshed GPU design. The Ryzen 5 4600H does feature an integrated Vega GPU with 6 compute units clocked up to 1500 MHz, but in practice the vast majority of systems using this APU will also feature a discrete GPU. The main competition to the 4600H comes from Intel's latest 10th generation, as well as previous generation parts. Intel offers Core i5 options for the entry-level market. However, these are just quad-core designs with average clock speeds. The Core i5 10300H, for example, clocks up to 4.5 GHz and packs 8 MB of level 3 cache within its 45W TDP. And really, this new 10th gen part isn't all that different from the quad cores that came before it. We get a small clock speed gain over the Core i5 9300H, which is itself a small clock speed gain on the Core i5 8300H. And if we trace it back a few more generations, we see a very similar design used for 2015's Core i7 6700HQ. With Intel being stuck on 14nm for this whole time, AMD has a big opportunity here to jump in and shake up the mainstream laptop market. The laptop I'm using for today's testing is another unit that I bought for this review series. Shout out to PC Case Gear, who helped me acquire this one when they hit Australian shores. It's an Asus Tough Gaming A15 that includes the Ryzen 5 4600H along with one of NVIDIA's new GeForce GTX 1650 Ti GPUs. So just an entry-level discrete GPU included here too, and because it's new we don't have a ton of comparison data right now for more GPU-heavy benchmarks, but we'll work through that over time. Couple of important notes about this test system. While it does look quite similar to the Tough Gaming A15 that I used for my Ryzen 7 4800H review, there are some subtle differences to the design both inside and out. On the outside, the slightly different color scheme will of course be huge news that'll rock the laptop market, but on the inside we also get a smaller, cheaper cooler that lacks an exhaust vent along the right side. The GPU here is a lower power variant than we get with the Ryzen 7 model, so this isn't a huge surprise. And this is just an entry-level laptop, but the cooler is pretty unimpressive in my opinion. Asus also ships this laptop with just 8GB of single-channel memory, leaving a free DIMM slot for future upgrades. However, this does cripple out-of-the-box performance, as running the memory in a single-channel mode does have a large performance impact. To ensure an apples-to-apples comparison with other systems, we swapped out the memory for a full 16GB of dual-channel DDR4 3200. This is, of course, the best way to benchmark, but just be warned that actual out-of-the-box performance from this system won't align with what you see in these charts unless you too slot in dual-channel memory. Lots of entry-level systems use just a single DIMM, which is a bit frustrating. It's not an AMD-only thing or anything like that, just a standard cost-saving method. Standard notes for our laptop reviews apply here too. That means the numbers you see are an average of results across several laptops with the same hardware configuration. You can check the description for the full list of laptops that we use for testing. We try and test apples to apples as much as possible while also removing bottlenecks, and all configurations are tested with the default power settings unless otherwise specified. For both AMD and Intel CPUs, this normally means a 45W long-term power limit. Let's kick this one off with a look at Cinebench R20, and wait, hang on, that can't be right. The Ryzen 5 4600H is up near the top of the charts, not at the bottom like you'd normally expect from an entry-level APU. With this score over 3200 points, AMD's mainstream APU is outperforming much higher tier processors from Intel, like the Core i7-10875H and the Core i9-9880H in the multi-core test. This is especially impressive given AMD's part packs just 6 cores, while Intel are offering 8 cores. The much better efficiency of Zen 2 allows AMD to take a win here by a double-digit margin over the 10875H while featuring a core disadvantage. The situation is even more impressive when pitting the 4600H up against the new Core i7-10750H in a core-for-core battle. AMD's part is 27% faster in terms of multi-threaded performance and about equal for single-thread, which is pretty great given these chips don't really compete with one another from a price perspective. It's not as good as Ryzen Mobile can get in terms of efficiency. The Ryzen 7 4800H is another 30% faster with the same power usage. The usual situation of clocking more cores at a lower frequency plays out nicely here for Zen 2 as it does with Intel CPUs. The big kicker comes when we actually put the Ryzen 5 4600H against the chip it's competing with, the Core i5 9300H. Now, I haven't tested the Core i5 10300H, which is their new chip, but on paper it should be very similar to the 9300H, maybe slightly faster. And in Cinebench R20, the Ryzen 5 4600H absolutely obliterates the 9300H. It's twice as fast for multi-thread and around 8% faster in single-thread as well. This sort of margin for multi-core in particular is pretty much unheard of in laptop form factors. We see similar outstanding results when looking at Cinebench R15 with nearly 2x the performance of the Core i5 9300H, as we were just talking about. Margins against Intel's other processors hold true as well, with a 29% lead over the Core i7-10750H and a 21% lead over Intel's older Core i7-9750H. AMD isn't messing around with video encoding performance either. In Handbrake, the Ryzen 5 4600H delivers another crushing blow to the Core i5 9300H, coming in 65% faster. To put this margin in perspective, what the Core i5 9300H could encode in 68 minutes, the Ryzen 5 4600H does in just 41 minutes, so a half-hour difference in encode time is no joke for these sorts of applications. This puts the Ryzen 5 4600H right up with Intel's Core i7-10875H in terms of Handbrake performance, actually beating that part in this test. That's very impressive given the enormous price discrepancy between 4600H laptops and 10875H laptops. If it's not already clear by now, AMD continues to produce massive numbers in anything multi-threaded. Another example is Blender, where the 4600H is over twice as fast as Intel's Core i5 9300H, and more than 30% faster than Intel's current 6-core offering. This is a workload where AMD is going toe-to-toe with 8-core CPUs with an entry-level product. That's pretty crazy. Ryzen also performs well for code compilation. For GCC compiling, the Ryzen 5 4600H is more than 50% faster than the Core i5 9300H, while also commanding quite substantial leads over Intel's 6-core products. This GCC compilation has multi- and single-threaded components, but unless we're fully single-threaded, AMD appears to hold a double-digit performance gain at least. The Ryzen 5 4600H also performs well for Chromium compilation using Google's recommended settings. Again, we're around 57% faster than Intel's quad-core option here, although the margins are a bit slimmer against 6-core parts. The Ryzen 5 4600H is still 8% faster though than the Core i7-10750H and around 20% faster than the Core i7-9750H. Moving into some shorter term workloads now, and with Microsoft Excel, we are getting our first good look at how AMD fares against Intel with the same level 3 cache size. Both the Ryzen 5 4600H and Core i5 9300H have 8MB of level 3 cache, and we see AMD providing similar margins to other tests with a 45% performance advantage. However, as soon as you jump up to an Intel CPU with 16MB of cache, this heavy Excel workload swings back in favor of Intel by a very slim margin of just a few percent. AMD is almost able to offset the cache disadvantage with much higher CPU core efficiency, but it can't fully get there. While this is representative of heavy Excel performance in lighter productivity workloads as seen in PCMark's productivity test, AMD does hold a lead here thanks to a higher single-thread performance. We're seeing a 10% margin over the Core i5 9300H, along with around a 7% lead on the Core i7-10750H and 9750H. Then for general PC usage for things like web browsing and app loading, AMD also holds a small margin here with their 6-core H-series processor. At worst, we're getting equivalent performance to a Core i7-10750H, which is a pretty great place to be in. 7-zip is another workload that typically plays nicely with AMD CPUs for decompression in particular. As we've seen a number of times, the Ryzen 5 4600H is substantially faster than the Core i5 9300H in this test, and we do see around a 20 to 25% lead over Intel's 6-core CPUs in decompression as well. However, compression is another story. AMD does easily beat the Core i5 but can't keep up to those Core i7 offerings. MATLAB R2020A is a widely used tool by engineers, and for those who do use MATLAB a lot on the go, it seems AMD once again is the best choice. Not only is the Ryzen 5 4600H a decent 28% faster than Intel's quad-core, it's also 7% faster than the Core i7 10750H. Since those latest updates, which stop unnecessarily crippling AMD CPUs, AMD has become a great choice for this app. The weakest result for Ryzen is with Adobe Acrobat PDF exporting. In this single-thread test, the 4600H is marginally slower than the Core i5 9300H, and that margin grows with Intel's higher clocked parts like the Core i7 10750H. We're not talking a huge deficit here, but it's not the best result for the Ryzen 5 processor. AMD remains the faster CPU option for AES cryptography. This is a hardware-accelerated function on modern processors, and it appears AMD has the better engine for this, pulling 30% ahead of Intel's competing laptop processors. The following benchmarks are all compute workloads, so this means they include some form of GPU usage along with CPU usage. Given the system I have features an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1650 Ti, I don't really have any solid comparison data for these tests, but I figured I'd include them anyway just for reference purposes, so you can see how this sort of entry-level system will compare to some of the higher tier stuff that I've tested previously. Adobe Photoshop is not a very GPU-heavy application and is mostly dominated by CPU performance. The Ryzen 5 4600H performs quite well here, matching the performance of the Core i7 9750H despite featuring a slower GPU. This configuration easily outperforms the Core i5 9300H when paired with the GTX 1660 Ti as well, which bodes well for creators that do a lot of Photoshop on their laptop. Next up, we have Adobe Premiere. As a reminder, we're currently using the 14.2.0 beta for testing, as it introduces hardware acceleration for NVIDIA and AMD GPUs and should be representative of performance moving forward. In Puget's export test again, the Ryzen 5 4600H performs well considering it has a slower GPU. And if you want to use a software encode, for example a 2-pass encode, the Ryzen 5 system punches well above its weight, slotting in between the Core i7 10875H and Core i7 10750H, despite featuring just an entry-level GPU for effect acceleration. The editing experience on Ryzen is also quite solid, performing well in Puget's live playback workload, matching Core i7 tier processors. And then for effects like Warp Stabilizer, Ryzen APUs as a whole sit a class above Intel offerings. Final productivity workload for today is DaVinci Resolve Studio, and this is one where the GPU plays a significant role in encoding performance. Given the GTX 1650 Ti isn't the most powerful GPU going around, it falls towards the bottom of the charts. Will be interesting to see how the 4600H fares when paired with something more powerful like a GTX 1660 Ti or RTX 2060, but for now, this is the only laptop that I could find. I also wanted to show at least some form of gaming benchmark here, but the GTX 1650 Ti is easily outclassed by other GPUs in my database in most games, and heavily GPU limits the system most of the time. Even in a game like CSGO at low settings, the benchmark pass has some sections that were GPU limited with just this 50-watt discrete card. So for gaming performance, we'll just have to wait for a proper comparison to come along because this GPU limited environment isn't all that suitable. I'd expect most GTX 1650 Ti systems to perform very similarly due to this GPU bottleneck. The CPU just isn't much of a consideration. Let's blast through some performance comparisons before wrapping this video up. The Ryzen 5 4600H is significantly faster than the Core i5 9300H in most workloads, which I suspect will also be the case with the Core i5 10300H, that is only a marginal upgrade. Multi-thread performance is up to twice as fast with the core count and efficiency advantage that AMD holds, but even with single-thread performance we saw better performance in most instances. For frequent use cases like decompression, cryptography, app loading, web browsing, and light productivity, the 4600H was the fastest CPU. The Ryzen 5 4600H is also generally faster than the Core i7 10750H, a higher tier CPU from Intel that features the same 6-core layout. In multi-thread workloads, the 4600H was in the region of 20 to 30% faster, and also fared better in some lighter thread count tests. However, the 10750H clocking into the high 4 GHz range for burst applications, as well as having great single-thread performance and higher cache, Intel's Core i7 CPU can take the performance crown in a few tests, often by pretty slim margins. Similar story with the Core i7 9750H, although in areas where the Intel part wins, the margins are closer than what we just saw with the 10750H. I think in general it's safe to say that AMD is providing better performance with the same core count with this generation of laptop CPUs. Impressively, the Ryzen 5 4600H holds its own with the 8-core Core i7 10875H in multi-core tests. In fact, the Ryzen 5 4600H can be up to 10% faster. However, with superior single-thread performance and higher clock speeds, there are also plenty of workloads where the Ryzen 5 4600H is not faster. I've mentioned in the past how the Ryzen 7 3750H was not a very good laptop processor, and this is shown quite clearly with the performance gains AMD were able to achieve moving to Zen 2. The Ryzen 5 4600H, the entry-level part from this generation, decimates AMD's flagship from the previous gen. Some of the performance gains here are ridiculous, like over a 2x advantage in handbrake and comfortable 20% performance gains for single thread. As for how the Ryzen 5 4600H stacks up to the Ryzen 7 4800H, it's no surprise to see the Ryzen 5 option falling behind. Generally speaking, the 4600H is around 20% slower for multi-thread tasks and mid-single-digit percentages slower for single-thread. What's impressive here is that in the same 45-watt power envelope with the same boost characteristics, AMD are able to add in 33% more cores for around a 30% performance increase, going from 4600H to 4800H. Higher core count parts are usually more efficient in mobile form factors as they sit in a more favourable position on the voltage frequency curve, but AMD seems to be going above and beyond what is usually possible here. This is probably a result of binning and simply using high quality silicon for the 8-core chips. And while the 4600H is in a lower bin, it still delivers much better performance than other CPUs around its class. It's hard not to be impressed with what AMD are delivering this generation with their 7nm Zen 2 based Ryzen Mobile 4000 APUs. The Ryzen 7 4800H achieving a 30 to 40% multi-core performance lead over Intel's current high-end 8-core processors really blew me away, especially given AMD's past attempts at an H-series laptop APU. But while the high-end parts set the tone for AMD's Zen 2 lineup, I think the Ryzen 5 4600H is the most impressive of the bunch. This 6-core CPU offers a performance advantage over Intel's Core i5 quad-cores that is simply unheard of in the mobile space. You don't see 2x performance leads with the same price class very often across computing as a whole, let alone power-constrained laptop form factors. The reality is the Ryzen 5 4600H is punching well above its class, often matching or beating Intel's Core i7 processors, especially the Core i7 10750H. If you go by the standards Intel have set in the market, AMD's Ryzen 5 CPU is offering upper mid-range performance at the very least, if not just straight high-end performance in an entry-level package. And I think Intel have been a bit blindsided here because offering just a quad-core CPU in the Core i5 10300H with their latest generation to compete with this 6-core Ryzen 5 CPU is looking a bit silly right now. Granted, the Core i5 range isn't that popular with OEMs, but whether the Ryzen 5 4600H is competing against the Core i5 range or a Core i7, AMD still comes out on top in most productivity workloads. How well the Ryzen 5 4600H fares in practice is going to depend greatly on the system it's being integrated into, because this simply is not going to be a major bottleneck for entry-level configurations. What's more likely is we'll see performance limited by the memory and GPU configuration, as is the case with this tough A15. This system has just single-channel memory out of the box and a GPU that tops out at a GTX 1650 Ti. The Ryzen 5 4600H is also powerful enough that it throws up interesting questions around laptop configurations. Most of the time, OEMs are quick to offer Core i7 CPUs at anything above the very base model because Intel's quad-core is not that great. But in an entry to mid-range system, is a Core i7 or even Ryzen 7 required? Could OEMs offer, say, a GTX 1660 Ti system with a Ryzen 5 4600H for less money than an equivalent laptop featuring a higher tier CPU? That could end up being a fantastic balance in the budget space between price, CPU performance, and GPU performance. Anyway, that's it for this look at the Ryzen 5 4600H. Hopefully you have all the information you need now if you're thinking of buying a laptop in the entry-level space. I only paid 1,500 Australian dollars for the TUF A15 system, which I think is a pretty great buy right now. I think the Core i5 10300H systems in Australia were starting around the 1,1700 Aussie dollar mark, so you're actually getting quite a decent price saving there if you opt for the Ryzen 5 option with a similar GTX 1650 class GPU. So yeah, I think AMD's really nailed this processor release in Zen 2 in the H series. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see how the U series fares. That's next on the agenda for testing those. So probably a good time to subscribe to catch all that when we get around to testing it. We also have our Patreon page if you're interested in supporting us directly. It really helps out for things like buying laptops for these sorts of reviews, and you can get access to our Discord chat, monthly live streams, behind the scenes videos, all that sort of thing over there. So check that out, and I'll catch you in the next one.